How close are we to a full-blown international crisis sparked by Israel and Iran? We'll break down the key airstrikes, Iran's retaliation, and what world leaders are saying right now. You'll also get the latest on oil prices, military moves, and whether diplomacy still has a shot. Let's get into what's really going on and why it matters more than the headlines are telling you. Before the crisis made global headlines, tension between Israel and Iran had been building for decades. Back in the 1970s, the two countries cooperated quietly until Iran's 1979 Islamic Revolution flipped the script. From that point on, Iran saw Israel as an enemy and hostility replaced diplomacy. The core of this rivalry? Nuclear power. Iran's covert Ahmad project in the 80s raised alarms, and by the time the 2015 nuclear deal or JCPOA was signed, there was hope for stability. But when the US pulled out in 2018, Iran resumed uranium enrichment, and Israel warned the world it couldn't wait much longer. In the shadows, things were already boiling. Starting in 2010, Iranian nuclear scientists were assassinated in a campaign widely attributed to Mossad. Cyber attacks like the Stuxnet worm sabotaged Iran's nuclear progress. Meanwhile, Iran armed proxy groups in Gaza, Lebanon, Iraq, and Yemen. Israel struck back, targeting weapons, shipments, and personnel. That long-brewing Cold War turned hot in 2024 when Israeli strikes killed senior Iranian officials. Then, in June 2025, Israel and the US bombed key nuclear sites. Iran launched missiles in response. The question is, after years of silent warfare, has the point of no return finally been crossed? Now that we've unpacked the long-standing rivalry, let's zoom into the spark that set off the current fire. What exactly happened in June that jolted the world? On June 22, 2025, the US launched a highly coordinated strike, codenamed Operation Midnight Hammer, on Iran's nuclear strongholds in Natanz, Fordow, and Isfahan. B-2 stealth bombers dropped 14 deep-penetrating bunker busters, while Tomahawks from submarines provided backup. Fordow's underground chambers took heavy damage, though Iran may have moved some assets beforehand. While President Trump called the attack total obliteration, early US intel painted a modest picture, months of disruption at best. Yet the CIA countered with a graver take, Iran's program set back by years. The IAEA confirmed serious damage, though full details remain murky. Iran didn't stay quiet. Less than 24 hours later, it launched 20 missiles targeting US bases in Qatar and Iraq. Thanks to advanced defense systems, most were intercepted. No casualties, just a clear message: we're not done. Globally, the response was loud. Gulf countries closed their airspace. The UN and EU demanded de-escalation. Trump downplayed Iran's response as very weak, while Congress debated checks on war powers. So here's the real question. Was this just a show of strength, or the opening move in something far more dangerous? With missiles launched and nuclear sites bombed, the world didn't stay silent. How did global leaders respond as tensions between Israel, Iran, and the US reached new heights? In Washington, President Trump praised the airstrikes as a bold success, claiming they forced Iran toward a ceasefire. But behind closed doors, US intelligence painted a different picture: just a few months of nuclear delay. Meanwhile, Democratic lawmakers pushed back, warning that the strike sidestepped Congress and could spiral into a wider war. Russia reacted with fury. Its foreign ministry accused the US of violating international law, while Dmitry Medvedev went further, suggesting some countries might even help Iran arm itself. China echoed those concerns, calling the attacks a breach of the UN Charter and urging all parties, especially Israel, to pull back. Europe took a more measured tone. EU leaders pushed for restraint and fresh talks, and the UK stressed that avoiding further conflict must be the region's top priority. Saudi Arabia and Turkey also called for de-escalation. On the international stage, the UN labeled the strikes a dangerous escalation, while NATO backed the US but warned against prolonging conflict. So, can global diplomacy still steer this crisis off the edge, or are we already too far in? We've seen the missiles fly and the statements roll in, but what's actually happening on the ground and what could happen next? Let's break down the military movements and what they might lead to. Right now, Iran's signaling it's ready to raise the stakes. Parliament has greenlit the potential closure of the Strait of Hormuz, a vital artery for global oil. Iran's also rolled out medium-range ballistic missiles and pushed launchers closer to Gulf waters. Proxy forces are on standby in Syria and Iraq, while the Houthis have already fired at Israeli targets from Yemen. Israel, on the other hand, is staying aggressive. Since mid-June, Operation Rising Lion has targeted Iran's infrastructure and intercepted incoming missiles. Patrols near western Iran are on high alert to stop more launches. The US has responded with force too. About 40,000 troops are on high readiness across Gulf bases. Warships are keeping vital sea lanes open and monitoring Houthi threats. So what's the outlook? We could see anything from limited exchanges to full-on regional war. Iran could disrupt oil routes, activate proxies, or draw in bigger players like Russia or China. The scariest scenario? A wide-scale war that drags in NATO. The question now is, how close are we to that edge? Let's shift gears for a moment. What's this conflict doing to the global economy? As missiles fly, markets don't just watch, they react. And in June, the movement was swift. Right after Israeli and US strikes on Iran's nuclear sites, oil prices jumped. Brent crude shot up more than 7% as traders feared a chokehold on the Strait of Hormuz. But when Iran's retaliation skipped energy infrastructure and diplomacy kept shipping lanes open, the panic faded. Oil dropped back below $70. Experts called the market's calm remarkable, suggesting investors saw this crisis as manageable. Some even forecast Brent dipping closer to $60 next year, thanks to strong non-OPEC supply. Meanwhile, global markets rebounded. US stocks, after a brief wobble, climbed, with the S&P 500, Dow, and Nasdaq all up more than 1%. Bond yields fell, the dollar softened, and investors leaned toward equities and commodities. Gulf markets were mixed, but Dubai hit a 17-year high. Still, what if things spiral again? A true disruption in the strait could send oil soaring past $100, reigniting inflation and squeezing economies that depend on imports. Airlines, manufacturers, and central banks would all feel the pressure. Could the next missile launch trigger not just war, but a global recession? Let's pause and focus on the part that doesn't always make the headlines: the human toll. Beyond the missiles and politics, what does this conflict mean for the people caught in the middle? After Israel's strikes on Tehran, over 100,000 Iranians fled their homes in just days. Many headed north, where shelter and supplies are scarce. And if fighting spills further into Iraq, Syria, or Lebanon, neighboring countries like Turkey and Jordan, already hosting millions, may be pushed past their limits. The risks don't end there. Within just 12 days of airstrikes, Iran reported at least 800 dead, including civilians. Gaza's toll is even more staggering. Since late 2023, over 56,000 Palestinians have died amid repeated attacks, with aid workers and seekers increasingly caught in the crossfire. Relief access? Nearly non-existent in many areas. The key corridors have shut down, and groups like Doctors Without Borders now describe Gaza as a death trap. The UN warns that its operations for millions of refugees may soon be halted due to funding shortfalls. So how much more can relief agencies endure? And how long until a humanitarian collapse triggers consequences far beyond the region? When war spreads, it's not just borders that break, it's lives. Now that the dust has started to settle, at least for now, everyone's asking the same thing. Is peace even on the table, or are we just in the eye of the storm? Diplomatically, there's still movement. Between April and mid-June, the US and Iran quietly held 6 rounds of indirect talks through Oman and Italy. Iran floated the idea of freezing uranium enrichment in exchange for sanctions relief. Even after the airstrikes, U.S. Envoy Steve Witkoff called the back-channel talks promising. Meanwhile, Qatar and Oman have taken on the role of messengers, facilitating quiet exchanges between Iran, Israel, and the U.S. Oman even drafted a ceasefire plan. Russia has also offered to step in, supporting a framework that lets Iran keep peaceful nuclear capabilities while addressing Israel's security concerns. And on June 20, the UK, France, and Germany joined in, urging Iran to return to diplomacy if the strikes stop. But is that enough? Iran demands a halt in attacks before resuming formal negotiations. Israel hasn't fully committed. And even when a temporary ceasefire in place, the pressure is high. Can diplomacy hold the line, or is this just a break before the next round begins? The answer may shape the region for years to come. So, is this just another flare-up or the start of something bigger? The pieces are moving fast, and the next steps could reshape the region or the world. If this helped you make sense of the chaos, drop a comment with your take and send this to someone who still thinks it's just another news story.